A very good morning, all of you. Welcome to day 13 of our 21-day challenge. So, in today's discussion, we're going to have an elaborate discussion related to one specific topic in microbiology. Before that, we'll have a general discussion and welcome all once again. So, I hope it is all streaming fine. Let me know if you have any issues with either video or audio quality. Fine. So without much delay, let's start with our presentation as soon as possible. But before that, I've asked you a question. It's a test for a wakefulness. I said count the number of dots. In fact, of course, I counted and placed them. So how many dots do you see in the comment? In one of the comments which I posted. Harita says 17, which is wrong answer. So those who are awake, wide awake, I want you to check that phrase once again, the comment once again. Test for wakefulness, count the number of dots. So do count and let me know the number. 17 is wrong answer. It means you're partially awake. Right? So let's go ahead with our presentation. I hope you guys are ready. And before we start, make sure you have your customized notes ready. We have abundant points to discuss and to highlight in this specific discussion. So day 13 of our 21-day challenge, as we are moving ahead, each and every day is getting more exciting. And I'm personally getting more used to waking up early than ever before. So this is something which is very exciting, and the thought of waking up early in the morning and getting things done is actually acting as a booster. I hope the same is true with you. Also, feel free to share your views regarding the same. So today's general topic will focus on this specific information. So reference is Psychocybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So glancing at negatives but focusing on positives. So what is this all about? In fact, whenever something a negative or bad experience, so-called bad experience happens, we tend to get stuck. But should we get stuck or should we move ahead? If we need to move ahead, why should we move ahead rather than getting stuck and complaining? So glance at negatives, but focus on positives. Automobiles, cars, vehicles come equipped with negative indicators placed directly in front of a driver to tell you when the battery is not charging or when the engine is becoming too hot, when the oil pressure is becoming too low, etc. To ignore these negatives might ruin your car. However, there is no need to become unduly upset if some negative signal flashes. In Big Bang Theory, Penny's car always has this issue. Check engine light is on. Those who watch Big Bang Theory. So even in spite of check engine being on, Penny is never depressed, isn't it? So, however, there is no need to become unduly upset if someone negative signal flashes. If some negative signal flashes, of course, Sheldon Cooper tends to get upset. So you merely stop at a service station or a garage and take positive action to correct, right? So a negative signal doesn't mean the car is no good. All cars overheat at times. So whenever there is a device, there can be issues. However, the driver of the automobile does not look at the control panel exclusively and continuously just because there are some negative indicators. To do so might be disastrous. He or she must focus his or her gaze through the windshield, look where he or she is going, and keep his or her primary attention on his or her goal, wherever he or she wants to go. That is reaching the destination. You have to drive. So he or she merely glances at negative indicators from time to time. And when he or she doesn't fix upon them or dwell upon them. He or she quickly focuses his or her sight ahead of him or her again and concentrates on the positive goal of where he or she wants to go. It's as simple as that, and it's a beautiful analogy, for us to correlate and understand this with our daily events. Just because something negative has happened doesn't mean that we have to stop, we have to get upset. In fact, it's an indicator that we need to change our course towards right direction, our right direction, so that we'll reach our targets or goals accordingly. So this is one of the best examples I've ever come across in my life. So this is something which I felt equally inspiring. So I wanted to share with you guys as well. So glancing at negatives but focusing on positives doesn't mean we should ignore negatives. Of course, they're essential to keep us on course, right? So with this general discussion, let's move ahead with our academic part. And before we move ahead, Trilok says 20. I'm sorry, Trilok. It's wrong answer. It's not 20. Let's see if at least one of you will get right answer. Count the number of dots. Test for wakefulness. Right. So in today's academic part, I've chosen diphtheria, where we'll discuss about the same at length, including some very interesting points and some general trivia or information regarding diphtheria. Right. I hope you guys are ready. Make sure you have a customized notes with you. Those points which are highlighted, you can enter them, or it's up to you. You find any other additional topic important or additional point important, you can make a note of it as per your convenience. Okay. So diphtheria. It's a potentially fatal, contagious bacterial disease that usually involves nose, throat, air passages, but may also infect skin. We have, in fact, different forms of diphtheria: pharyngeal, laryngeal, cutaneous, nasal. Different forms of diphtheria are present. So, its most striking feature is the formation of a grayish membrane covering the tonsils and upper part of throat. So whenever you come across diphtheria, we hear the so-called membrane. So what is this membrane all about? How is it formed? We'll also deal with that a bit later. So we can underline this point, right? The most striking feature of diphtheria is formation of a grayish membrane covering the tonsils and upper part of throat. And it's advised not to remove that membrane, because removing that membrane would even complicate the issue. Because of removal, release of exotoxins more into bloodstream, and we'll get back to that as well. So, like many other upper respiratory diseases, diphtheria is most likely to break out during the winter months. At one time, it was a major childhood killer, but it is now rare in developed countries because of widespread immunization in the form of DPT, which you're all aware of. So 3 doses, right? We'll get back to that as well. Since 1988, all confirmed cases in the United States have involved visitors or immigrants. In countries that do not have routine immunization against this infection, the mortality rate varies from 1.5 to 25%. Don't bother about these percentages. This is just for your idea, okay? So that's the role of immunization. You can clearly see with immunization, you're able to prevent this, but without proper immunization, you can see a mortality rate going up to even 25%, which is very alarming. And we also will see an example of what happened in Russia because of this outbreak, because of this epidemic, right? We'll get back to that later. So persons who have not been immunized may get diphtheria at any age. The disease is spread most often by droplets from the coughing or sneezing of an infected person or carrier. So this is something which you can highlight or make a note of. Mode of spread, right? Spread most often by droplets from the coughing or sneezing. The incubation period is 2 to 7 days with an average of 3 days. It's vital to seek medical help at once when diphtheria is suspected, because treatment requires emergency measures for adults as well as children, because there are some life-threatening complications. We'll get back to them as well. So the symptoms of diphtheria are caused by toxins produced by Diphtheria bacillus, which is Corynebacterium diphtheria, which is gram-positive Chinese letter pattern. In fact, toxin production is related to infections of bacillus itself with a particular bacteria virus called a phage. This is very, very interesting. I mean, you can just make a note of. The toxin production, that is the exotoxin production by Corynebacterium diphtheria, is related to infection of bacillus itself with a bacteriophage. The intoxication destroys healthy tissue in the upper part of throat around the tonsils or in open wounds in the skin. So because of this exotoxin, there is destruction of tissue, and fluid from the dying cells then coagulates to form a telltale gray or grayish green membrane. And inside this membrane, the bacteria produce an exotoxin, which is a poisonous secretion that causes life-threatening symptoms of diphtheria. So the exotoxin is carried throughout the body in bloodstream, destroying healthy tissue in other parts of body, right? So this is the story of the membrane formation and the bacteria which is involved in diphtheria, Corynebacterium diphtheriae. In Greek, it is a rubber membrane. The most serious complications caused by these exotoxins include inflammation of heart muscle, myocarditis, damage to a nervous system in the form of loss of speech, diplopia, which we'll get back to at the end of the slide. So the risk of serious complications is increased as the time between onset of symptoms and administration of antitoxin increases, and as the size of membrane formed increases. The myocarditis may cause disturbances in heart rhythm and may culminate in heart failure. The symptoms of nervous system involvement can include seeing a double vision, diplopia, painful or difficulty swallowing, slurred speech, or loss of voice, which are all indicators of exotoxin's effect on nerve functions. The exotoxin may also cause severe swelling in the neck called bull neck, right? Some complications. Now, signs and symptoms of diphtheria vary according to location of infection. As I mentioned prior, different types of diphtheria depending upon the anatomic location. Nasal diphtheria produces few symptoms other than a watery or bloody discharge. On examination, there may be small visible membrane in nasal passages, and nasal infection rarely causes complications by itself. However, it is a public health emergency or problem because it spreads disease more rapidly than other forms of diphtheria. Nose droplet infection, as we discussed prior. Now we have another type of diphtheria, which is pharyngeal diphtheria, which gets its name from the pharynx, which is part of upper throat that connects mouth, nasal passages with larynx. And this pharyngeal diphtheria is the most common form of diphtheria. You can just make a note of it, causing the characteristic throat membrane. The membrane often bleeds if it is scraped or cut. It is important not to try to remove the membrane because the trauma may increase body's absorption of exotoxin, further complicating the situation. And other signs and symptoms of pharyngeal diphtheria include mild sore throat, fever, rapid pulse, and general body weakness or malaise. Right? Now, another form of diphtheria, which is laryngeal diphtheria, which can be life-threatening, which involves the voice box or larynx, is most likely to produce serious complications. Fever is usually higher in this form of diphtheria, and the patient is very weak. Severe cough, difficulty breathing, loss of voice, development of bull neck, indicating high level of exotoxin in bloodstream. Obstruction of airway may result in respiratory compromise and death. That's in case of laryngeal diphtheria. And then we have cutaneous diphtheria, a skin form of diphtheria, which is sometimes called cutaneous, accounts for around 33% of diphtheria cases seen in people with poor hygiene. Any break in skin can become infected with diphtheria. The infected tissue develops an ulcerated area, and a diphtheria membrane may form over the wound but is not always present. The wound or ulcer is slow to heal and may be numb or insensitive when touched because of loss of innervation out there or that particular site. Diagnosis, the penultimate part. So, diagnosis of diphtheria can be confirmed by a result of culture obtained from infected area. Material from a swab, we go ahead with gram stain. So, these bacteria, diphtheria, bacillus are gram positive, and they appear as beaded rod-shaped cells grouped in patterns that resemble Chinese characters. Also, we can another laboratory test involving growing of diphtheria, bacillus, and Loeffler's medium. So, diagnostic part. These are some of the points which you can highlight, right? And images, if you remember, we covered them in different aspects of our test series or e-classes. Also, if you want, we can post them along with this video in the form of links after the session concludes, right? And treatment part, antitoxin immunization, we'll deal with them now and then we'll conclude the session. The most important treatment is prompt administration of diphtheria antitoxin. Antitoxin is made from horse serum and works by neutralizing any circulating exotoxin. Interesting thing is, no human antitoxin is available for treatment of diphtheria. We use horse serum, right? And antibiotics are given, but they are not replacement for this antitoxin, which is very, very important. So antibiotics given to wipe out the bacteria, to prevent spread of disease, to protect the patient from developing pneumonia. However, they are not substitute for treatment with antitoxin. So both adults and children may be given the following antibiotics: penicillin, ampicillin, erythromycin. Erythromycin appears to be more effective than penicillin in treating people who are carriers because of better penetration to infected area. So you have assertion and reason here. Why erythromycin is better in treating diphtheria patients? Because of its better penetration. Cutaneous diphtheria is usually treated by cleansing the wound thoroughly with soap and water and giving patient antibiotics for at least 10 days, 1 week to 10 days. Universal immunization is the most effective means of preventing diphtheria, as we have seen in stats initially, where we in countries with poor immunization, mortality rate is increasing up to 25%. The standard course of immunization for healthy children is 3 doses of DPT, diphtheria tetanus, diphtheria pertussis tetanus preparation, given between 2 months to 6 months of age, 1 dose, booster doses at 1.5 years, 18 months, and entry into school around 3 years maybe. So adults should be immunized at 10-year interval with TT injection or TT toxoid, tetanus diphtheria toxoid. So as you know, toxoid is a weakened form. Toxoid is a bacterial toxin that is treated to make it harmless, but still can induce immunity to the disease. And finally, diphtheria patients must be isolated for 1 to 7 days or until 2 consecutive cultures show that they are no longer contagious, because this is highly contagious and a short incubation period. So again, you have another assertion and reason. So family members, other contacts, diphtheria patients must be watched for symptoms and tested to see if they are carriers. They are usually given antibiotics for 7 days and a booster shot of TT, right? Diphtheria tetanus toxoid. I mean, most of you might have taken TT, at least not DPT when you're a child, you might not be knowing that, but TT is something which we commonly take the moment we have some minor injuries with rusted iron or soil-based injuries. Finally, to understand the significance of this diphtheria, right, reporting is necessary to track potential epidemics, to help doctors identify the specific strain of diphtheria and to see if resistance to penicillin or erythromycin has developed. In 1990, an outbreak of diphtheria began in Russia and spread within 4 years to all newly independent states of the former USSR or Soviet Union. By the time the epidemic was contained, over 150,000 cases were reported and over 5,000 deaths happened. A vast public health immunization campaign largely confined the epidemic by 1999, almost a decade, 1990 to 1999. What about Corona? What about COVID pandemic? Only time will answer. Right? So these are some of the topics which I wanted to highlight. Very interesting information along with very important information in terms point of view. So we've seen about the features, the positive agents, the features, signs and symptoms, complications, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and some examples. So just go through this presentation once again in your free time. And if you found it difficult to enter all the points in the process of our discussion, you can do it again another time. It hardly takes 15-20 minutes maximum, right? So before we conclude, let's have a brief summary of all that we have discussed so far. So first and foremost, we're talking about glancing on negatives, however, focus on what we have to do. So just because something bad or negative has happened doesn't mean that we have to stop. It's only an indication that we need to correct our course and move ahead with positivity, enthusiasm, and determination. I mean, these are not special or separate qualities which only few possess. Each and every one of us have these qualities well ingrained deeply within us. The only thing we need to do is tap into them and go ahead, forge ahead. And also, we've seen about diphtheria. We've seen various aspects of diphtheria, as I mentioned, so many key points. I've not placed images, any images, because we covered them either in form of test series, discussions, or so on and so forth. Also, we'll be uploading all these videos to our e-classes, and in e-classes, we'll be attaching additional information in the form of literature, in the form of images, along with these videos very soon. And also, we'll drop you an update accordingly, right? So if you have any further queries, you need any further clarification, feel free to get back through mail 24/7, right? So I appreciate your active participation early in the morning. Well done. Let's keep this consistency, enthusiasm, momentum going. I'll see you again tomorrow at 5 a.m. And tomorrow is Sunday, so we'll have or we'll plan a session in a different format. Okay? So, love you all. Have a fantastic day ahead. By the way, the answer is 18. Yes, Preeti, Pooja, very good. So, rest of you, I don't know if you're sleeping. Okay. If you observe, test for wakefulness, after wakefulness, there is one dot, which you should obviously consider because I asked you to count the total number of dots, isn't it? So it's 17 plus 1, 18. Very good. Pooja and Preeti,